What we would like to do is give you our top tips on how to avoid a construction dispute throughout a construction project. And we'll take you through our recommendations of the key areas that will help you navigate through the construction process and avoid a dispute. The first area is to understand your contract. So know the contract that you are going to be or are already engaged in, and ensure you have an understanding of what that contract requires, what that requires from you, and also what that requires from your client. So a fundamental understanding of the contract is key to success. The next top tip to ensure that you avoid disputes where possible is to understand the risks that you carry. Those risks, in theory, should have been discussed and agreed and therefore be incorporated into the contract. One of the key ways in which disputes arise is when contractors do not understand the risks and therefore they're presented with them during the construction phase. So the second element is to ensure you understand the risks that you carry on a construction project. The next key tip for the avoidance of disputes during construction projects is to understand your client's risks. So understand the risks that aren't carried by you and that actually belong to your clients. It's important that you are clear and both parties understand this to ensure that there's no argument and there's no dispute when a risk is crystallised. Another top tip in avoiding disputes during the construction process is obvious, but it's important, and that is to understand the works information or the scope, depending on the contract type that you're working under. So it's making sure you have a full understanding of the works that are to be delivered and the works that are not to be delivered under your scope. So that's about understanding the specification, understanding the working areas, and making sure that the works remains within those requirements. Our next key tip for avoiding disputes within construction is to know the contract procedures and what those procedures require. Now, depending on the contract type, that can be a whole host of procedures, but typically it's about understanding early warning procedures and compensation event procedures and times if you're working within the realms of the NEC contract. It's about knowing the programme submission requirements, so when they should be submitted and the level of detail that is required, applications and when and how often they should be submitted, and also the notification of any changes or any variations if you're working under a different contract form. So this is really about understanding exactly what the contract requires throughout the construction process by way of procedures. Our next top tip and recommendation is to have regular project meetings. This is with the client and with other parties to the construction project generally. Communication is key, we know this, but it's all too easy to let things the weeks gallop by, especially as changes arise. So it's all too easy to let these meetings fall by the wayside. We strongly recommend that periodic, weekly if possible, project meetings are held. They are minuted accordingly, and communication within those meetings is clear and updates and changes are agreed. Our next key tip for avoiding disputes in a construction project is to know your programme. As obvious as that may sound, many disputes arise out of the fact that contractors don't understand their programme. So it's about understanding not only the commencement and completion date, but also the sectional completion dates. And as and when delays arise and extensions of time are added, it's about understanding the impact that has. So it's really about keeping clear and having a fundamental understanding of your programme throughout the construction phase. Our next tip is around your client, and it's about understanding your client and their way of working. Now, this is on the basis that there is a whole host of clients out there, some of which have construction experience, some of which don't. So again, it's about understanding your client and their way of working. That way it may well be that they require more information, but because of a lack of knowledge, they may not feel they can ask. So it's really about understanding your client in detail to make sure you can guide them through the process where necessary or give them extra support where it's required. Another key tip, and an important one, and again this is an area we see many disputes arise, is knowing the completion requirements of a contract and a construction project. So it's about understanding what's required when the actual physical works have come to completion. So what documents are required, what warranty requirements there are, what health and safety folders are required, because many contracts now do not achieve practical completion until a whole host of requirements have been met. And if you're in a contract that is subject to liquidated damages, those damages will be imposed if all of the practical completion requirements haven't been met. So again, it is imperative you understand what the completion requirements of the contract and therefore the project are. Our final tip is around understanding and knowing the contract requirements around defects and defective works. So it's about understanding what is defined as a defect, what constitutes as a defect. This can often differ between different projects. Something in one project might be a defect, in another it might be defined as a snag. And it's understanding the return requirements. So how long is the defect period? Is it 12 months? Is it 24 months? And do you have different response periods? So have you got emergency response period for defects which need to be remedied within 6 hours? Or there can be a whole host of requirements depending on the environment of the site that you're working on. What's important is that you understand the procedure and the requirements around any defects that are found.